Hi guys, we are a Hygro team, and I'm Yingran.
I'm Xiuqi.
Shanzhe.
Yixuan.
Yeah. With the climate change, extreme hot weather influenced the ground and environment. Hygro is a proposal for an agricultural response to flash droughts and hot waves. We aim to mitigate the process of aridification, applying the principle of moisture balance. To this end, we designed a dynamic and responsive habitat operated by a community of wilderness rangers living on mobile and transformable units. The units individually and collectively facilitate water harvesting through shading, water condensation, and wind resistance. Water is used to sustain the community and to enable soil humidification, alleviating the negative effect and ramification of flash droughts will allow for a safer and better management of water and soil towards practices such as regreening and sustainable agriculture.
Firstly, there is our environmental research part. Our project works for flash droughts that happen in extreme hot weather. With global warming, extreme drying events such as heat wave, drought, and wildfires are becoming frequent and normalized. From all types of drought, we find flash drought, which rapidly dry out vegetation and prevent the soil from absorbing water properly in only a 3-week onset cycle. The drying out of vegetation provides fuel for wildfires, which spread rapidly once they are ignited, and the destruction of the soil causes crops to begin to wither, which results in a decline in crop production and economic losses. By comparing flash droughts with general drought, we find that flash drought happens significantly more often than general drought. This is contrary to our perception of drought as a slow onset process, and that means we need to respond more quickly to flash droughts. We also compare the frequency of flash drought and wildfires, and they are relevant with area experiencing flash droughts being more prone to wildfires. This is further evidence that we need a better response to flash drought to prevent wildfires. We analyze the development of flash drought, which tend to occur in areas where vegetation and crops are able to grow normally under the influence of heat waves and monsoons, where the moisture in the soil evaporates rapidly and is carried away by the wind. This led to flash drought and resulted in wildfires and crop losses. Through the process of flash drought, we can say it happens for 2 main reasons, one of which is due to heat radiation, which increases the surface temperature and the evaporate pressure on the soil, which leads to a rapid loss of soil moisture. The other main reason is wind. Dry wind directly takes away the moisture from the soil, drying out the vegetation. In response to the causes of flash drought, we reference mulching. Mulching provides shade for the vegetation and reduces evaporation of soil moisture, as well as resisting the wind from carrying it away. So we use mulching as an overall strategy for responding to the environment and continue to explore how to provide shadow, capture moisture, and resist winds. After the environment strategy, we began to select areas suitable for our project, and through the frequency of flash drought, we identified hotspots of which California is likely to experience on average 40% of the time each year. So we further analyzed California, where the land is under extreme evaporative pressure due to the heat wave. Vegetation has become extremely dry and the productivity of the land is declining. In addition, California is prone to monsoon winds. blow winds start in the Great Basin and blow towards to the ocean. In the process, the winds are stressed and become warmer and drier, thus affecting the vegetation on the surface. So we analyze these two important indicators for California: heat radiation and wind velocity. Overlaying the two indicators, we can see that the areas highlighted in yellow are those with the highest risk of flash drought, and we grabbed one of these areas as our final test site, which has a sparse vegetation and dry surface. Then we analyze the location of the final test site, which is located around Chico City, a regional airport, nature parks, and unreturned agricultural land.
Our units have two main components, Canopy and living space. Canopy do most response to environment, like water harvesting and collecting, shading and wind resistance, and provides covered exterior living space. And the living space part is habitable unit, agile and mobile to reach remote locations. There are many complex terrains within the site, such as mountains, plains, basins, etc. These complex terrains require the unit to have the ability to fly in order to reach different destinations. We wanted to move slow, and it can cover more area as it can. And it also needs to move to another destination very fast. So we use kind of propellers to satisfy the request of move on ground and fly. And with the principle of mulching, it's important to capture moisture. First, we need to respond to external sunlight and temperature. Because of the solar radiation, the surface temperature rises, which will increase the evaporation of soil water. So we want to create enough shadows with a deformed roof to decrease the temperature of the ground to reduce evaporation. Second, deformed structure should also be the water harvesters to resist evaporating water going to the higher atmosphere. The evaporated water can be captured by the netting structure. From the reference, it can be found that the factors affecting the condensate are the density of the net, the way the water is directed, and the tips of contact water. The effect of pattern on water condensation, these three different patterns shows that the more net compact, it can condense more water. And we also get the idea from the natural creatures like lizards. Lizards have the structures of varying densities and tiny grooves and spark-like structures on the surface of its skin. We found out that the more pattern compact, the water flows more organized and dropped less. In the last pattern, we changed the shape of the net, figure out that the shape is also a parameter to organize water flows. In the angle of 45 declined degree, we control the certain angle. We found that water drops the fastest in pattern 4, and it drops is not organized, and the slowest in pattern 1. After that, different shapes of water droplets were calculated. And finally, the relationship between the droplets and the tilt angle was derived. The larger the tilt angle, the smaller the droplet size. And vapors condensed have a different performance in different time of the day. To simulate the change of water evaporation, we add quantity sand and water in the glassware. It shows that the highest efficiency of water condensed happens in the morning, which is the period of greatest temperature variation. We tested the nets in different parameters like density and pattern, and then we found that 3.5 millimeters grid can condensing most water. And different shapes of bombs shows that cylinder bombs and cone bombs can attract more vapor. And the water flow needs to be organized, and we tried the straight, declined, and inclined patterns have better performance than straight one. By all the results, we tested them in natural environment with specific air humidity and soil humidity. Then we try to connect each layers together. And then superposition layers and add structures, which shows in the bottom. The first layer, we add a wider soft skeleton and add toughness bombs. The second layer is wing-like shape of the branches directed water flow. And the third layer is to increase the density of the grid and its contact area with air. Finally, the bottom layer is supported skeleton. The combined net has a better water retention capacity because of its relatively three-dimensional structure, where water droplets can stay inside the net. And to test the quantity of water the net can collect, we put the model in different time of the day, in the early morning and during the daytime. During the day, there's not much water condensed on the net. And in the morning, there was some water condensed in the net structure, where the red circle is the droplet. To weigh the net and the structure together, we get a quantity of water. And the water harvesting structure is sloped at the edges to allow water condensed on the surface to allow into drainage for human use. Like the first diagram is very vertical to the rooftop, which means it can't flow many water to drainage. And the second one, it has specific angle. And when the angle is very big, the water will drop back to the ground and it can't flow to drainage. By research the demand of water use, we use recycled water to support household and bathroom water. The water of drinking needs to be collected from environment. To test the angle of each panel tilted, it leads to the percentage of water drop and flow. Based on the quantity of water to support human use, it leads to the size of the harvesting canopy. And here's the animation of how condensed rooftop canopy collect water and make it flow to the drainage for human to use. We use the net like declined tilts to make the water flow into drainage. And here's the quantity we calculated. We found that 1.5, we used a model of 1.5 meters and make it modified to calculate that it satisfies the human use of water.
So we have a demand about need a structure to hold the harvesting system. So we were thinking about what kind of structure we should to use. And it's a capital project in Tanzania called Earth Smell. They were using the eyeball shape to capture water from high level and also reducing the effect of wind on modular rotation. So we were thinking if it would be a good fit for our project as well. So we compared the airborne shape to a different base shape for testing, kept the same covered air. Then we will run the simulation to evaluate the performance of wind resistance. Airborne shape is optimized shape. And we also compared the cluster of different shape. Eyeball cluster is also the best. So we tested the relationship between the windward air and the wind resistance factor and come up with optimized result. Those are the digital vision of how that can work. Based on the simulation result, we correct the first vision of the canopy structure, but it was also many joint and not lightweight enough. So we make it simple. For simplify the structure, we reduce some roots to minimize the structure. I made the double deformation to enlarge the form variable by twisting and sliding. You can see the video. It's all on the Arduino. And those are the iteration of Canopy first for optimizing wind resistance and light weighting, and second is for enlarge the form variable, and we classify the structure of Canopy. Some rules for network support can be very lightweight. For the full structure would be stronger. Those are the different way of transformation of Canopy. In order to better adapt to the deformation of the structure, we test the different ways to select or harvesting night. This is the physics model for the harvester. When wind comes, the air behind the canopy get less wind, which protect air away from flash drought. Okay.
To explore the possibilities of spatial contraction and expansion, we try a series prototype attempts. The deformed frame was the first one we studied to discover the possibilities of spatial extension and deformation interlocking. And here is our first attempt at enclosing the volume, which can contract inwards and expand outwards. We also tested in the soft linkage and used the deformed frame to connect them. We found that the deformed frame has good performance of linkage, which means it can move together all the joints. Here is the deployed volume model that can transform well. And we add more folded times to of the deformed frame. And we add a curve pattern and deformed frame together to make it like bumps to expansion the space. To make a double layer, it can act like that.
And next is about the prototype of living space. The demands of living space, it can be flexible for moving and be expanded to provide a more comfortable space for living. And so we started by studying the bistable structure, and we can find that all the transformation are driven by the triangle drivers. And the good point is that it can be expanded by itself. And also, if we want the expansion factor can be increased to the next level, we can make the triangle drivers rotate themselves, and it can expand into more than twice its organized size. As we continue to look at the bistable pattern, we found that if we connect the gap, it will be expanding to the vertical direction. So by this, we try to combine the double layer scatter, and the pattern itself can be transformed from the panel to volume. So we made the driver for the dynamic of the transformation. It can work like the video. And we try to structure it by some rigid geometry to envelop the space. It was not only expanded on volume, but at the same time, the single layer space was turned into the double layers. But we still wanted it can be expanding from volume to volume, so we tried to some types of different layers, the bistable structure. And after we structured the soft one, we found it was very hard to control the angle of rotating, and deformed is hard to drive, which makes the deformation difficult to drive. And then we split this bistable structure and got the more expansion. And we tried to use the soft envelope and got the more expansion. It's worked better on expansion. So we combine the strong points together, like make the driver bigger to be more rigid, and using a soft envelope to phase the angle changes. And for our unit, it should be as lightweight as possible. So we try to use the airbag for dynamic to transform our units and use a minimal space separation to get the space more fit to live in. And here are the functional partitions of the interiors. So we divided along the major expansion sections. And the space change, we want the interiors to be more functional. So the animation is showing how the working area would be transformed to the sleeping area. And also, the living room would be transformed to the dining room. The side table could be transformed to the dining table. And also this animation shows about the interiors, expands, makes the functional changes. And here's the floor plan compression before and after the interiors expansion. And as you can see, the area of living space has expanded from 26 square meters to 46 square meters. And this is a different view of living space and animation of the transformation. And this is explode view of living space.
The unit performance better when it have collective than single, but the unit can't have enough ability to collect water and energy. So we make energy station. It can support like 3 to 5 units to get energy and water. And it also a harvesting canopy storage. Like the unit can collect the canopy from the station, and then it goes other arid area to do the balanced humidity work. And after the field is greening, it come back to get back to the canopy and go to other spaces, other places. It's also an environmental detector. It can search like where is happening flash drought and to make the units to get to there. And the cluster always like formed in the places in valley. And the reasons of the clusters is hot radiation and wind. So it always like resisting the wind and back forward to the wing side. Yeah, and here's the exterior of living space and how it works in the field. And when you work in clusters, you have better efficiency to heal the field. Like here's the timeline of our unit working. Unit can fly individually and to get to the energy station to collect a canopy and take energy. And when they come to the field that arid area or happens flash short, it can deploy the wings and the living space, and it be a settle mode. And when the flash short passed, they come back to the energy station to take the canopy back and fly away. Yeah, and fly to another target. Here's the collective working sceneries. Yeah, thanks for listening. Here are our physical models, and in the first part is our test of maths. We test different kinds of like curve pattern. It's this one. This one is curve pattern in single layer. It can actually deform frame like that, and which we want to get space expansion. To make it double layered, it can work like that. Work like that, and the space is expansion in two sides. Yeah. And here's the iteration of our units. We want to like do this like that. It can expansion. And then we used a linkage together to get our harvesting canopy, which you can see is very joint here. And it's very heavy and it's not good for flying or storage. So we make it double folded. Yeah, it can expansion twice as the wings. To connect the nets and the structure together, it also needs we study from curve pattern to make it like it can perform like that. It can deformed, but not destroying the nets. And here is our bistable structure. We use it to make living space, like it can expansion like that. And here is the section model of our unit. This part is the connector with canopy and our living space. And this part's interior is for storage. We use many multifunctional like furnitures in it. It's a more specific one. Yeah, just like it showed. This part is living and bedroom, and here is bathroom. And this part showing is for a human to use. And here is the different layers of water condensation net, like the different density and declined structure and the bombs, so that it can storage as much water as it can. And this is our physical model of the whole unit. The net is double there, like, yeah. When you fold it, this structure make it not destroyed and deployed the net from the structure. And we use deformed frame to make interlock. And we used the principle of deformed frame to make our energy station. This one is the model of energy station. It can, the wings can expansion when it folded, and yeah, it's like it's a use of deformed frame. Here's are all the deformed frame, like the rods. Yeah, it can perform like that. And this one. Oh, okay. This one can be folded like that. You just control this part. It shows the linkage of deformed frame. You control just two joints, and it can deform all the model. Yeah, thank you.
I love it. The first thing I think is when I saw it, I was like, okay, does it really have to look like a bird, right? I was like, the first thing is like, but then you start going through the reasoning why it looks like a bird, and there is, you know, sometimes just mimicking the silhouette of an object is a weird type of biomimicry, but you had good reason to do it, I think, and then you start showing all the folding mechanisms, and then I think, okay, these guys should really start looking into compliant mechanisms, right? And then you also show you actually looked into compliant mechanisms, and I'm like, okay, fuck. I have built several expanding structures, also one in the desert, and lived inside of it. And I think we are at a very, very interesting level here. And I have two things I would say. One is water harvesting in dry environments or desert environments is a topic that captures a lot of architects working in extreme environments. And I've seen many, you know, I've been fascinated by it myself. And I've seen many examples of it, but I think, and I was a little worried when I saw it because it's been used many times because there's something fascinating about taking water out of thin air, right? I think that's, and it invites you to make some kind of piece of architecture around that. It's like it's an inviting brief, but I think you did it so thoroughly that it was still interesting. The thing you know, and this I think is also too much to expect from, but I would say if you would push it a little bit further, think about manufacturability, right? Also because in your concept you're actually proposing that there are many of these, and I think that you know, I get a headache looking at some of these pieces, how they are manufactured, and and that's a mistake. I make that myself. It becomes too overcomplicated, and of course that's also a stylistic choice that I think you guys are very aware of, that you have picked specifically. But I would definitely look into manufacturability. Yeah, that would probably be my only little point of feedback and critique. Yeah.
Did you want to respond, or?
We have do Arduino and like airbags to activated. Yeah. So it's like we're trying to make it more like not that mechanical and more automatically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very thorough investigation, and I appreciate very much that all the formal choices are motivated by specific constraints that follow in an organic and almost necessary way from the framing of the problem. I think that's fantastic. I think the linkage research is really rich. The bistable mechanisms, in particular, I found really quite engaging. In terms of fabrication with bistable mechanisms, there's sometimes a sort of like assumption of certain compliant materials, and especially when you're working at this scale, it can, there's questions of wear, and the funny thing about some of these mechanisms is that there's, especially when you're working with something that's sort of like spatially deployable as opposed to something that's just sort of like a two-dimensional linkage, there can be very slight and unexpected sort of tolerance issues when you work with that at scale, and it's difficult to anticipate what those would be. It's probably outside the scope of a student project. But if you were to push this further, that's something to be aware of. I had a couple of questions. I mean, first, the quantity of water that each one of these is harvesting seems as if it's sort of like calibrated, or this is dimensioned to sort of like sustain someone, to sustain sort of like a person, I guess. See, it's like 1.6 kilograms of water per day or something. So you sort of intimate that you would need a flock of these to make any sort of impact in sort of like a larger area. And so I begin to wonder, I mean, each one of these things is going to be a couple million pounds or something. I mean, they're going to be expensive to build. And I just wonder if the canopy is appropriately scaled. I wonder if there might be some way, if you look at some of Chuck Hoberman's mechanisms, like his iris mechanisms, for example, they can collapse quite compactly and then expand to a space which might cover a bit larger area. So, I mean, it's a little bit particular, but, if you're going to calibrate this project to the specific problem that you've identified, the question of scale and cost becomes really critical. One other thing that I think is interesting is actually these kinds of sort of condensation processes are also used in desalination, right? And so you can imagine this occurring, of course, in a desert, but you can also imagine it occurring on a coast where there's not fresh water. You can imagine it occurring in many other contexts. So, I could imagine this vehicle as something which is somewhat amphibious or has different kinds of lives, essentially, in different kinds of ecological contexts. So, if you were to take the project further, I think there's an opportunity to think of it as a kind of very broad intervention, but which takes on different sort of like tactical valences in different parts of the world in different environments. But I think it's a very nice project.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work. I mean, I agree. I think it's an amazing work. So well done. I don't have much to say because actually I really like it. So I'm just kind of going to give you compliments. But maybe I'm going to give you maybe just 2 challenges, following maybe with the comments from before. I agree that it seems, let's say, maybe overly designed, but I don't mind it. Because in a way, we are in the desert. Now I'm looking at over-complex design, but I'm in London, and my background is London in a way mentally. And I think if you're in the desert where there is nothing and you have a complex design, is actually not a problem. So I think sometimes just to kind of, maybe as well in the images to show a little bit more of the context on the render, so just to get a sense of the emptiness of the landscape. So that's one thing. And then another one, I think, yes, maybe it is almost like, can be expensive, etc., just because of the technology. But again, it is precisely absurd. So, this is so precise that the absurdity of it doesn't matter anymore. So I think, again, maybe you need to do scenarios that show a little bit more like what is the lifestyle of being there. Like I don't get a sense of the timeline. Like I don't get a sense if I'm there, what is 1 week. if I need to drive out, every day, 2 times a day, 1 time a week. So just a sense with the time running that we can see it, like in 1 day, 1 week, 1 season. I think it would be nice, even just purely to communicate to someone else that is not an architect. Let's say if you want to get, an investment, let's say. I think that for me would be the next step. But well done, really amazing.
Yeah, just one quick footnote on that. This question of lifestyle, I think is, for me, also a really big question. It's like, who are these people that are going out into the desert and deploying these structures? And who are the people that are going with them to create this kind of like colony? That I think there's a kind of like design fiction aspect of this where you could be thinking about the kind of organization that is that's facilitating this deployment and what role these people play. But I think it's a fair question, is like, who would want to live like this and for how long?
Can I interject a bit? First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I mean, it's been really interesting to see how you managed to develop. I mean, you work very well under pressure, I have to say. And you are very quick into catching up, and surprising us. And I think this presentation demonstrates a lot in terms of how you managed to really address different aspects of the project. To answer maybe to some of the points that were that came through on the comments, which I agree. I mean, it's something that in a way we discussed. The cost, the scale, the people, the community that are going to live there, and I think we try to find kind of some response to it. It's not an easy answer in general, but I would say that ideally, in terms of scale, there was something that they have done which to me made a lot of sense into thinking that the unit and the canopy are not like a sort of, let's say, a dichotomy that stays fixed, meaning that there are more canopies than units. And they can release the canopy almost as a kind of exoskeleton or a snake skin that is released on the ground, and therefore that could really change a bit the game in terms of water collection, and in terms also of the flexibility of the system and the kind of efficiency in a way. The other aspect about the cost, that's a very good point. The whole kind of discourse about trying to have mobile architecture is to try to get very close to the automotive industry and say, let's say this object is going to cost, let's challenge, for instance, is going to cost exactly like one of the SUV that we see on the road, for instance, which are not needed anyway. Not in the road, neither on the Californian kind of arid landscape. But in a way, I think that would be the challenge. When you can reproduce and mass produce and mass customize in a way, using the automotive industry as a reference, I think in a way you can achieve like a reduction of the cost. Of course, it's, as you're saying, is precisely absurd because, of course, before we get there, it's going to be a big challenge. But anyway, the other aspect about the community, I think the idea of curing the wilderness or the landscape, or taking care of nature, it's actually an idea that leads to having actually a proper job. Taking care of nature as part of a larger ecosystem, which includes also the built environment. And that's why they call it rangers. I mean, they are, let's say, practically part of this sort of human interface with nature that is somehow not only addressing the issues locally, but is addressing larger scale issues, which then go back to the idea of climate, kind of changes, shifts, and this sort of interaction with the weather, which is more resilient and less, let's say, kind of fearful, kind of embracing a bit what are the possibilities coming from critical conditions, I guess. But just to conclude from my side, I mean, thank you so much. Congratulations for this. I mean, it's really impressive to see it for the first time all together.
Yeah, I mean, I think the work is quite impressive. I think it touches on too many topics, maybe. I think it's very ambitious. I thought it was at some point stopping, it continued to even more and more. So I think the ambition that was up is quite commendable. You really went through a lot. And I like a lot those prototypes, the small ones. I think they really show a lot of elegance in the understanding and the intuition of water harvesting, what are these patterns supposed to be. And I got very excited when you were referring that you looked at lizard skins, and the patterns of water and the drops. But then when I then look at these renders and I see that the actual structure becomes very traditional, even clunky looking in some aspects, I think that to me, the aesthetics in that aspect don't transition in a way that could have been, right? If you have really taken forward the idea of why do lizard skins work so interestingly, why do they create this transitional pattern that collect water, allow movement, I think that would have taken this into a much sophisticated level of resolution that I think would change the outcome of the image. We wouldn't see this and say, oh, it's a deployable structure like potentially many that we have seen or that could potentially be more viable. I'm not saying that, so I'm taking the idea of cost, but if you're going to customize millions of these, I don't see why the structure has to be such a different hierarchy from the pattern, Why couldn't these two morph closer together, be more identifiable? That you can see that just this pattern becomes a bit thicker when it needs to be structural, it becomes more elastic where it needs to bend, and therefore create a larger repertoire of what your canopy is creating, because I don't think that the water will flow in such a repetitive way, right? If you have made a pattern that really flows, how the water will flow in the different angles of the geometry, it would have transformed this into a very unique condition, right? And I think all the rest, I think the unit idea, I agree with all the comments. To me, the main focus will be how to address this more geometrical structure and inhabitable spaces, right? That to me show the greatest uniqueness, and I feel them it's where they don't really convince too much on the aesthetic and architectural sense. Yeah.
I have to say I agree with Paul, but I love the project too, and I think I love a lot of the studies and these patterns, the way they, as you said, the deformation, the absorbed deformation. A lot of this is very, very valid. Also, lovely the angles, where the size of drops, where it drops, where it doesn't drop, where it still flows. All this very beautiful and organic. And I also felt when I looked at it, and by the way, I'm sitting here and I've seen the project many times. Somehow I thought these are when they're flying, they're actually using the wings. But now I realize, obviously, these are nets. But I do felt also when I'm sitting here, although it's a beautiful object, maybe it's to do with the fact that you work with these kinetic members and sliding and so on, that this thing looks too heavy in the end. I mean, it's not flying, so, but still, I think there's an intuition coming from Paolo, which I very much agree. And one can imagine something which pleats maybe or folds. And is lighter, and sometimes you see a lot of these kind of kites and flying objects and so on. I mean, this is not flying, but still there's a sense of lightness, and what Paul just said, the integration of the pattern with maybe something structuring, a bit like a dragonfly. There's something there, I think, which I think could be in the next iteration. But I think it was a beautiful project. I wanted to make one point where, in terms of the scale of it, and I agree, I think Pierre had addressed it quite well. If this becomes mass manufacture and it becomes lighter, then you can maybe have an impact. But for me, it's also the other story is already quite interesting, that you can go to an arid landscape and be self-sustaining, and like Andrew said, this is maybe one person, one wing kind of thing, and so it doesn't necessarily rely only on the mitigation strategy. And the way these projects are evolved, that these questions remain open, right? And you could take in a way super light mass fabrication, and one vehicle is distributing 100 of them, or it's a community which becomes self-sustaining because it has, I guess, solar energy on the station, and it has water collection. You become an autonomous off-the-grid community to live in wilderness for the hell of it, and not to save the world.
Thanks. I think a lot has been said. I really applaud you for the studies. I think the models are excellent, and you did a lot of it. My only question or comment would be, I feel like you tackled stages of your project and tried to find a solution. And there's a lot of different studies which I love, like how you expand it. I just wonder if there's a more of one conclusion to expand space which works better than the other. And then maybe for the interior, there's not a separate study than for the exterior. It all becomes one model. It just becomes a different scale. But it's more, like I see stages, and at one point it would be nice to have it connected all in one model. That would be my only comment, because there would be really, it's beautiful studies, but to see one complete, for example, the interior, like if these models are combined with that as one big model, I think that could have been beautiful. But fantastic project. Thank you.
I just mentioned one other precedent that might be worth looking at. So I'm sure that you sort of like maybe dabbled in some computational origami sort of approaches. One of the first I don't know if he could be called a computational origamicist, but sort of like a mathematical sort of origamicist, this guy, Ron Resch, he had a very interesting method of working. Basically, he would take a very large sheet of paper and then begin to deliberately crumple. And he would unfold and then crumple and unfold and crumple and unfold. And then he would begin to find the folds which were the most pronounced. And then would begin to rectify those by drawing straight lines. And what would emerge from that were some very precise patterns for how to collapse that sheet into the crumpled ball that he had specified. And they were completely deterministic. He could reproduce that kinematic transformation, but in a much more analytic way. And what I think is interesting about your canopy is that you have these very specific sort of like angular constraints, right? There's a particular kind of curvature that's required. You could build that curvature as a surface and then begin to deliberately crush it and identify where those folds would need to be. So you could begin to think about this not necessarily as quite a rigid structure, but something that has, is this sort of like, it's an origami deployment, more somehow like akin to sort of like solar cells, or these very large sort of solar panels which are deployed in orbit. So anyway, it's a next evolution of some of this research, but I think it's very relevant for the kinds of things that you're thinking about.